Hey guys, it's Brody King, and you're listening to Pro Wrestling Post Podcast.
Hey guys, you're listening to the Pro Wrestling Post Podcast with your host, Mark Madison. This episode's guest is Brody King. Visit ProWrestlingPost.com for interviews, blogs, and upcoming events in your area. You can also listen to the podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, Android, or whatever podcast app you prefer. And now, here's Mark Madison.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody, and welcome again to the Pro Wrestling Post Podcast with myself, Mark Madison. I am joined by, growing in popularity, and glad I was able to get some time with him, Mr. Brody King. Thank you again for your time and your energy, Brody.
Oh, thanks for having me. I don't have much energy left after this weekend, but I will give you whatever I have left.
I appreciate that. So for fans that maybe aren't necessarily as familiar with your work, maybe you can give them a bit of a background where your early interest and pursuit in the industry began.
I've had an interest since I was a young child in wrestling. I've literally been watching wrestling since before I can remember, but it didn't really come into my life until my later 20s when I found Santino Brothers Training Academy, and I signed up for wrestling school, and 5 years later, here I am.
So when you initially got started, though, prior to like Santino Brothers, what was it about it that kind of gravitated you or pulled you? Was it certain performers? Was it certain moves? Was it certain matches?
I would definitely say that I was more of like kind of a fair weather fan for probably 13 until I was, I don't know, in my 20s, and then I kind of watched it a little bit more, but I was never like a mega fan. But from my early teens before, I was a huge wrestling fan, and it just came from my dad was a fan, and we would watch together, and he would take me to events, and I was always intrigued with guys like The Undertaker and Papa Shango and like the darker, like more like evil guys, like kind of I gravitated towards. When The Undertaker had like the Ministry, I thought that was like the coolest thing in the world.
I totally agree. Not so much maybe the corporate ministry, but the ministry itself had this real haunting nature about him.
Yeah.
Was there anybody within that faction that I know you mentioned Papa Shango, but that was more like earlier. But was it just
that was like more like the characters that got me into it.
Yeah.
But I mean, The Undertaker's been my favorite wrestler forever.
And
he was always, and then like the way that like Viscera looked, and then like the acolytes or the acolyte is that what it is? Acolytes APA.
Yeah.
Whatever it is.
Yeah.
They were awesome. I don't know. It just seemed like everyone had their role, and everyone was played so perfectly.
So, would you say that like the Brody King character that we see lends itself from some of that darker nature that you were interested in earlier on, or not so much?
I mean, it's definitely part of it. I'd say that Brody King is just me. I wouldn't even say turned all the way up to 10. It's just kind of who I am as a person in general. Like taking the horror movies I've always been obsessed with, and wrestling, and punk rock music, and just kind of mixing them all into one, and here I am.
Oh, sweet. Okay. Now, you did touch upon the Santino Brothers Wrestling Academy, but Rocky Romero, any connection there?
Yeah, Rocky was a big part of my finishing school. I would say he was like my finishing school trainer. Mm-hmm. He taught me a lot about psychology and really putting a match together and how to work a match and Japanese psychology and just getting deeper into that type of stuff.
Sorry, did you say Japanese psychology?
Or just like how the Japanese do things differently than Americans do things, and like teaching me how the Japanese put things together as
Okay, maybe you can help us just to understand the difference for those that aren't necessarily, because they look at one product, they question why they don't, but what is some of the mindset behind the Japanese um, concept to how a match is put together? Where does the ideology or the
I think that with American, like popular American wrestling, like the WWE, it's more based on like story and characters. And while they do still have that in Japan, it's also very much presented as like a sport and it's a competition. So you have two competitors that each have their own edge that are using it to, play out their match instead of just like, oh, this person is going to do this because he is under Vince McMahon's grasp or whatever it is. You know what I mean?
yeah. So it's a lot less predictable, I guess, in trying to predict if all signs lead to a Roman Reigns win per se. That wouldn't be as obvious watching a Japanese like match necessarily structured together.
I think so. And I mean, I think like, especially in like the bigger Japanese tournaments as well, like it's kind of hard to predict who's going to win the G1 Climax or the Best of the Super Juniors and stuff like that. They really keep everything, like anything could happen.
It's funny. I had a conversation with somebody about the G1 Climax just recently, and I threw out who I thought, but I'm basing that off of American process of like, okay, well, these certain things have happened. This person seems less likely to win it, but it's not that's not how to approach it. It's it's a whole bunch of variables, I guess, that go into consideration.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm a big fan of the Japanese style of wrestling, Japanese products.
Awesome. What did you walk away with Santino Brothers?
I mean, they gave me all the tools that I would need to be the pro wrestler I am today. Teaching me from the basics to, putting a match together to even they have lucha training every Tuesday under Los Luchas. So I got to learn the art of lucha libre on top of my American wrestling, which I think gave me a different angle coming into the business as a big man. But yeah, I mean, my trainer Jerry Chaos and Robbie Phoenix, they taught me pretty much everything I know.
How would you maybe best describe the style for somebody that hasn't? You mentioned lucha, but how would you best describe your ring style? Was there a bit of a hybrid, or do you stick primarily to one particular type, or is it kind of a process?
I would definitely consider myself a hybrid wrestler. It's very smash mouth, like in your face, but at the same time, I could jump off the top rope and do, some crazy flip or dive out of the ring. Like it's very unpredictable.
Yeah. Now, you'd said that always you were interested in as a wrestling fan from a young age. Fairweather kind of grew back into it. But were there any other sports growing up that could have been an outlet if wrestling didn't grab your attention?
All sports growing up, like I tried them and I just didn't like them. I never liked watching sports on TV. Like my dad wasn't like a sports guy. Like he liked wrestling, and that was about it. I wrestled in high school, and that was like pretty much to just try to be closer to the wrestling on TV.
That's awesome. Big transition, though, right, from the amateur to the professional.
Oh yeah, a lot of the footwork and basics and stuff like that transitioned very well.
Yeah. What have you found to be maybe the biggest difference per se?
Oh, I mean, they're pretty much two completely different sports. Like, collegiate wrestling is all about control, and pro wrestling, you have to, work with your partner at all times. You're not just trying to, take them down and force them to the
Oh, no doubt. I mean, there is that definite change from style to style. How have you found, I guess, in coordinating a match between singles and tag?
I tag team wrestling. I've been doing for about a year and a half, like seriously. And
Yeah.
I've only had probably, I don't know, 15 tag matches,
Mm-hmm.
but it's cool because it's like when you're putting the match together, you don't have to just like think about what you're going to do. Like you can think about like how you can incorporate your partner and do cool tag moves or whatever tag moves you guys do. Like I love tag team wrestling. Like I also love being a singles wrestler, but I love that I can change my style almost completely as a tag team wrestler, just incorporating my tag team partner.
Does working with a partner, is it more of a challenge because you need to all be on the same page, or do you find that it's pretty seamless and you just all know each other and can run through things? But
It definitely depends on your partner. Like I would say that if you get put in a promotion and you have a random partner, then it could be pretty hard because you need to have good chemistry with your tag team partner. And currently, I have a tag team partner named Tyler Bateman who has pretty much been one of my mentors in wrestling since I started, and we kind of hit it off right away, and we have great chemistry together. We kind of have very similar styles, so doing stuff together just seems very natural to us.
what is it about Tyler that you think has been so successful, or between the two of you working so well together?
I don't know, maybe just the fact that we share common interests in a lot of different facets of life, and then like our philosophies on wrestling are very similar, and just the way that we look at putting a match together is very similar as well.
Well, somebody that spoke very highly about you was somebody I spoke to just very recently, Mr. Jake Atlas, and he talked about how you've been a real guiding force to him. Maybe you could talk of that and what you see in Jake, and maybe how you feel your influences maybe help to build and better him.
Well, me and Jake started about a month apart from each other, and we were pretty much like the two people that in our, well, he didn't have a class. He was doing like private training, and I didn't really have a class at the time because everyone else quit. So we kind of got paired together, and we would just do class like 3 or 4 times a week, just the two of us for 3 or 4 hours at a time. And I don't know, we just kind of became inseparable. And then he ended up breaking his neck at one point, like about 6 or 7 months into our training. He did some crazy flip and landed on his head, and his neck was broken. And it was like I didn't see him for a few months, and I thought that he was maybe done. And then he came back, and I just started working matches when he came back to training. So I was kind of able to help him with what he missed out on, and also, support him coming back from an injury that serious.
Oh, no doubt. So when he spoke of the time that he's had in the ring, he's lost time in the ring because of, I guess, the injury and trying to get back to a different position.
Yeah, and I mean, he's one of the most naturally gifted athletes I've ever seen in my life. Like, he can literally do anything, and he's 6 feet tall and 200 pounds and can move like he's, I don't know, 5 feet tall and 100 pounds, like light as a feather. But he can also, work a really stiff, like, strong style match as well. He's a very talented person.
Now, developing a reputation and a name is always key. Where do you think things began to pick up for you and lead, generating more popularity? Was there a moment that maybe stood out, or moments for Brody King?
I keep looking back to a match I had at Defy Wrestling last September against Shane Strickland. I got in contact with Defy Wrestling through PCW, PCW Ultra here in Los Angeles. They were taking notice of me, and the Sheik had kind of mentioned to them, hey, you guys should check out Brody, maybe you should use him. And they ended up using me, and then a couple shows later they had me work Shane Strickland. And my match with Strickland was by far the hardest I've ever been pushed in a ring to that point. And it really opened up a lot for me mentally, like how I think about wrestling and how I perform in general in front of a live crowd. And I feel like I owe a lot to Shane, and I owe a lot to Defy for giving me that opportunity and pushing me to that limit. Because after that, the ball kind of started rolling. Like MLW, Major League Wrestling had contacted me shortly after that match. It was just like, hey, we hear good things from Shane Strickland. We hear good things from Defy Wrestling. We want to bring you in to Florida to start doing some of our stuff. And then from there, a couple other people started taking notice. I did Evolve at the beginning of the year, and then eventually I did Pro Wrestling Guerrilla in March.
We'll touch on Pro Wrestling Guerrilla in just a second if you're okay with that. But you had said that so going back to last year, so we're talking 2017, the fall of this year?
Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, this is maybe a little more of a challenge, but in preparation for that match, what kind of things did you and Shane maybe go through leading into it that he put your mind at ease and knew that it was going to elevate you? I mean, you couldn't predict necessarily what was going to come of it, but going into it, some of the planning?
Yeah, I don't know, he just has a way of, like, I feel that Shane is one of the people that just has a way of bringing the best out of anyone that he's in the ring with. And the way that he puts confidence in you as a wrestler, like knowing that he is a seasoned veteran of the sport and that he's been all over and he's wrestled some of the top talent, the fact that he's in the ring with me and, you know, I'm kind of a nobody at that point, I'm still trying to get my name out there, and he's talking to me like I've been to the biggest top of the mountain. Like, he's like, all right, so what do you want to do? Like, how do you want to do it? You know, what do you got? You're going to do great. Like, and then you just go out there, and I felt like, you know, I could go headline WrestleMania at that point. Just the way that we put that match together. It wasn't like anything I had had at that point.
This is King Cash, and you're listening to Pro Wrestling Post Podcast.
It's great when people put their ego at the door, and the most important thing is putting on possibly like the best dance they can. Was there any trepidation, any fear that, you know, he's become established, he's going to want to call the shots, or was it no? I've heard good things about Shane. I know working with Shane is going to be pretty easygoing. The impression you're giving is he's very easygoing, and it was pretty seamless.
Yeah, I mean, like, you might always have that worry, but about, you know, someone being a more established person and kind of wanting to call the shots, especially against someone that's not as established or well known. And he, like you said, he didn't have an ego at all, and he just kind of let me do my thing. He did his thing. We supported each other throughout the whole process, and I think it really translated well through the match.
And here we are, and we're talking about, you know, the growing success of Brody King, which is awesome.
Yeah.
That match notwithstanding, because you've already shared that, to date, what other matches do you feel have been maybe the most rewarding? You walked out with a whole new appreciation of the competition, how maybe you've improved as a competitor. Anything else other than that match in particular stand out?
I mean, there's been a few matches like crowd at PCW Ultra can be very intimidating because there's about 1,000 people in the room, and it's electrifying once you go out there. So if you're not prepared for that, it can kind of take you off guard. And a three-way match is usually kind of difficult to begin with, but that was definitely a big, rewarding match for me personally. And then, of course, when I debuted for Pro Wrestling Guerrilla, that was like a big milestone for me and a big goal achievement that I had starting wrestling.
Maybe share how that experience all came about with Pro Wrestling Guerrilla. You were also part of BOLA, I believe?
I am this year, yeah. I will be debuting it, or I will be making my BOLA debut this year.
Okay, so did you attend events even just as a fan before, or get an impression from talent how it was to work with the promotion?
So I kind of always knew about PWG just as a casual wrestling fan. I remember I would used to like look at their website and see if they had a wrestling school, like when I was trying to find wrestling school. But once I started at Santino Brothers, I attended a couple PWG shows. As a fan, I went to BOLA a couple years, and then I went to a few of their regular shows, and I was just, infatuated with that style, and like just looking at that, like that was one of the top promotions in the country, if not the world. And once you get there, that's when you can really say, like, I'm doing it. Like, I'm getting myself out there the right way. And as a local guy from Southern California, you always hear that, or that PWG doesn't book local guys and this and that. And it's just, they just need to book the right guy. And Matt Seidel ended up getting injured, and I had just landed in Dayton, Ohio, to do a Pro Wrestling Revolver show, and I got an email from Rick Knox that said, I got a message from Rick Knox that said, hey, you need to check your email. I was like, okay. And I checked my emails from PWG asking me if I wanted to do the booking on Friday. This was Wednesday at that point.
Okay.
And I was like, oh, man. So I called Sammy Callahan, and he was the booker for Pro Wrestling Revolver. I told him what was the deal, and he was just like, go do it. And I booked a flight home, pretty much landed in Dayton, and then got right back on the plane and went back home. Made my debut against Adam Brooks at PWG.
How did it go?
It was incredible.
Yeah.
Being billed from Van Nuys, California, and the venue being in Reseda, which is blocks apart.
Right.
The crowd kind of went pretty crazy when I got announced from Van Nuys, and that was a really special feeling moment.
No, it's the hometown boy that's doing big and going big. And how's the preparation for that match?
Oh, I was very nervous. It felt like I was having my first wrestling match all over again. Adam was fucking awesome. He definitely, like you said, he checked his or not even if he had an ego, but he was very good at giving me confidence in the match, and he was like, we're gonna do great, like you're gonna kill it, and we went out there and we killed it, and I couldn't have done it without him or without the support from everyone else around me.
Any particular spot or sequence that not only got the rise and reaction from the crowd, but that you and Adam were most pleased with how it was pulled off?
There was probably a couple. Like, I think that a lot of people, like the people that know me, probably know that I can do some agile stuff. But the fans that don't know me, just like I'm 6'6" in boots and 280 pounds, so I'm not like your average size luchador. So when I do like a knuckle lock, run up the rope, and do like of it and then do a tope con hilo over the top rope. A lot of people are kind of blown away by that. So when that happened, it got like a standing ovation, and that was pretty cool. And then also, Adam Brooks giving me a Canadian Destroyer and stuff like that. Like, those are always pretty crazy visuals for the fans.
Outstanding. And congratulations that things worked out as well as they did.
Thank you.
What are some of your aspirations in the ring, maybe moving forward? Who would you like to match up with and think that it would be a good matchup as well? You could fantasy book a little bit here if you want to, but just the whole, I mean, we're a few years in, name is developing, aspirations domestically, foreign.
I have yet to have a singles match with Jeff Cobb. We have been booked to have a singles match maybe 4 or 5 times, and something always happens. Either it gets canceled, or someone gets added to the match, or just something weird happens with the match that we don't actually get the one-on-one that we've been kind of going for. So I think once that finally happens, that will be a great match. We just recently worked at PCW Ultra. It was myself, Jeff, and Matt Riddle against each other, which they are also a tag team together, so that did really work out in my favor because they were kind of biased against each other and teamed up on me. So that didn't really help my case.
And well, maybe this is like an open request and forum, Jeff. If we can schedule something between both you and Brody and actually have it as one-on-one, let's make it happen.
Yes.
But what about promotions, places, countries? Where does Brody King think the future lies for him?
Honestly, I want to wrestle everywhere. I really want to wrestle in Japan. That's been a goal of mine since I started. I've always loved Japanese wrestling. I love Japanese culture. And yeah, that's just kind of my main goal right now is to go wrestle in Japan, preferably for New Japan Pro Wrestling, but I'll take what I can get.
Well, it would definitely work with already going in with an understanding of Japanese psychology and being able to apply that. I certainly would be tested there, no doubt.
Oh, absolutely. But other than that, I would love to go to the UK and work for companies like Progress or Flight Club Pro or Rev Pro, maybe WXW in Germany. Like, just do a full European shebang out of it. But I'm willing to travel and wrestle anywhere.
I wonder what a Walter versus Brody Lee matchup would look like. Interesting.
Well, that actually just happened at PWG on Friday. We main evented at the Globe Theater, and it was myself versus Walter.
And how did that go over?
Well, I lost, but I gave him a hell of a fight.
It's not always the result. It's sometimes the process, right?
Yeah.
On July 27th, you'll be competing for PCW Ultra during their Sound the Alarm event in a match against the King of Bros. It's funny how you were trained by Santino Bros, but you're facing the King of Bros and Matt Riddle. What can you share with fans and what they can anticipate about this match, your opponent, and why this match will be the match of the night?
Well, like I touched on before, he's not going to have Jeff there to be a buffer between the two of us. And although he is or was a professional fighter, I am a professional wrestler, and he's going to have to really bring his A game to best me in this one. He he's a world travel wrestler. He's a world travel fighter. But I think that I have a lot more to give him that he hasn't seen yet.
Definitely. Before we do let you go, Brody, we're just curious if you're up for a little game.
Sure.
Okay, so the game here on Pro Wrestling Post Podcast is called Wrestling Tinder. Much like regular Tinder, if you're interested in the topic, normally gets a chuckle once I give you the title. Much like regular Tinder, if you're interested, you swipe right. If you're not interested in the topic, you swipe left, and it forces me to have to scour my brain for something that you might be remotely intrigued by.
Okay.
Okay. It's funny. I'm going to hit you up with the same question I hit Jake up with. You being 6'6", about 280, 6'6" in boots, as you mentioned, about 280 pounds. Just yesterday, Kevin Owens fell 15 feet from the top of a cage in what's a planned spot. And thankfully, things worked out and definitely got a reaction. But I wonder, from the same company that had a real tragic fatality, although many years ago, with one of their performers in a really planned spot. We've seen Shane do it. Do you think it's necessary to have those? Is it once in a while? Does it lose something? Does it add something? Swipe left or right?
Swipe right.
Okay, go for it. Share your feelings.
Although I don't think that they need to be done often, because it definitely takes the specialness out of it. Everyone remembers when Mankind got thrown off the Hell in a Cell.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that is something that even pro wrestling fans remember. So that type of impact, I think, is important in pro wrestling, but at the same time, it shows that there's very real consequences to what we're willing to put our bodies through.
Mm-hmm.
And some people are just more willing to do the crazy stuff than others. But the ones that are, I have all my respect in the world.
You mentioned Mankind, not much different from Kevin Owens. Both have families, both have a family to go home to. To see that is pretty major. And Shane McMahon, who's had his kids at ringside, whether it's planned or not. So definitely there are both sides to consider when something like that comes into play.
Yeah, absolutely. It really all just depends on the performer who's doing it. I don't think anyone's really holding a gun to their head, metaphorically speaking, and telling them you have to do this spot. I'm sure that it's like, hey, what if we do this? It would be pretty insane. And as long as everyone is okay with it, then I guess it's okay. I don't know. It's hard for me to say. I don't think that I would ever do it, but I also don't think that others shouldn't.
That's a fair enough answer. To each his own.
Yeah.
On behalf of Brody King, this is Mark Madison thanking you for listening to the Pro Wrestling Post podcast.
Thank you so much for listening to the Pro Wrestling Post podcast with Mark Madison, and we'd also like to thank Brody King for his time. Once again, please visit ProWrestlingPost.com for interviews, blogs, and upcoming events in your area. And you can also find the podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, Anchor, or whatever podcast app you prefer.